Now you know the skills of phonics. I want to introduce you to two approaches to phonics instruction. You as the teacher may have professional decision making to decide how you want to teach phonics in your own classroom. The traditional approach on the left is where you teach phonics in isolation, so all by itself. That would mean that during the day you have a time where you just teach phonics for 10 to 20 minutes. It is not taught in the context of sentences or literature. It's just looking at sounds and maybe sounds and words, but mostly letter A says ah, letter SH says sh. It's just looking at the sound components. It's usually taught whole group where everyone participates, and a lot of the tasks that you ask boys and girls to do are written down in workbooks or on worksheets. This was very popular in the 1960s and 1970s. This is the way that I learned phonics. But classrooms today are still using this method. Now, there was a big push away to the contemporary approach that I'm going to introduce you to in just a moment. But with Common Core and explicit instruction, students are now receiving phonics more often taught traditionally in classrooms, I believe, than they were just a few years ago. So that's an approach that you may still see in classrooms. The second approach is called the contemporary approach, and this is where phonics is taught, but it's taught through using real, authentic literature. We have teachers reading books, just like we do in our daily or our weekly book sharing, and then pulling out of those books some words that we want to teach. So this week, you were reading the story, The Runaway Pumpkin, and I said you could teach the N sound, you could teach the TH sound. We went through all kinds of sounds you could teach because we hear them over and over naturally in a book. And this is what makes phonics more meaningful because they can associate it to something else and they can actually remember it better. So sounds are taught in the context of literature, and they're also taught in chunks. So we might look at if we learn TH, we might learn all the digraphs. So TH, SH, WH, or instead of learning individual sounds so much, we might learn word families like ache, or at, or an, or in, instead of learning the I in isolation and then the N in isolation. So it's a more whole, to part approach. Contemporary phonics instruction is differentiated. So you may have a whole group lesson, but more times than not, this is in small groups, and they're guided so each child is at the level that they need. So maybe you have boys and girls just learning beginning letter sounds in one group, and you have boys and girls learning vowel diphthongs in another group, and you have another group in between that's learning consonant blends. It's whatever they need. Contemporary phonics instruction integrates spelling, and so to teach boys and girls to spell, we give them lots of discovery, inquiry-based activities like sorting. Much like our concept circles, we might give them a group of words and say, what is the same about these words? Or sort these words into two groups, but we might not tell them what the titles of the groups are. And so real open-ended kind of figure-it-out problem-solving approaches to phonics make it very meaningful. Also, games and learning centers are great ways to integrate phonics instruction into your classroom. So scavenger hunts, think about those hula hoop activities we saw in our video last week for phonemic awareness. Games like that where they're active and jumping around and writing and stretching sounds, but doing it in an active way. That's what the contemporary approach is looking at, because we're looking at real words from a story. This started in the 1990s, right when whole language was big. But right now, like I said, it was going strong until just a few years ago. You will see a pretty equal divide between classrooms right now that are using this approach and classrooms that are using a more traditional approach. At the bottom of the page, you'll see a little blue box, and I said in this box that there is a new traditional approach to phonics. And this is kind of like an in-between of the two approaches, and I think this has emerged as a real strong runner in this instruction. The new traditional approach takes the old approach, but it takes that isolated phonics instruction and puts them in literature, and this literature was made just for phonics instruction. So we have book companies and publishers writing books to teach phonics, and I'm going to show you some of those in the next slide. So this new traditional approach is not just isolation. It's not quality, authentic literature. It's kind of an in-between. So let's see what that looks like.